Welcome back to Biblical Greek Tidbits. In this video, we will do a brief word study on the Greek word hypóstasis, which occurs 5 times in the Greek New Testament, 22 times in the Greek Septuagint, and only once in the Apostolic Fathers, namely in the Epistle to Diognetus. We will focus our attention only on the 5 occurrences in the Greek New Testament, so this is far from an exhaustive study. As is the case with so many English words, the Greek word hypostasis has a fairly broad range of meanings. Consider, for example, the many meanings of the English word run. My Webster's Collegiate Dictionary lists more than a dozen meanings just for the noun run. As in English, we must clearly understand the context to determine the precise meaning of each occurrence of the Greek word hypostasis. First, we list the references used in preparing this video presentation. Here's a listing of the references that I used in preparing this video. If you want to take a closer look, just pause the video. The word hypostasis occurs 5 times in the Greek New Testament, 22 times in the Greek Septuagint, and once in the Apostolic Fathers in the Epistle to Diognetus. But we will focus only on the Greek New Testament occurrences. For reference and further study, I have listed the occurrences in the Greek New Testament and the Greek Septuagint on the following 3 slides. These lists are the result of a search using Accordance Bible software. See reference 5 above. We next take a look at the definitions and glosses in italics for hypostasis found in reference 1 above, commonly known as BDAG. 1. Definition 1. The essential or basic structure/nature of an entity. Substantial nature, essence, actual being, reality. Definition 2. A plan that one devises for action. Plan, project, undertaking, endeavor. Definition 3. Situation, condition, frame of mind. Definition 4. Guarantee of ownership/entitlement, title deed. We further note here that the primary or root meaning of the word hypostasis is, from Westcott, reference 4, that which stands beneath as a sediment or foundation or ground of support. In addition to the BDAG definitions, here's some information from reference 2, Theological Dictionary of the New Testament. Helmut Koster of Harvard University gives what I believe are some helpful comments regarding the New Testament uses of hypostasis. The following comments are based on his analysis. In short, he concludes that both of Paul's uses of hypostasis in 2 Corinthians are related to a plan or project or purpose. He further states that the uses in Hebrews are more difficult to assess. Koster suggests the phrase invisible transcendent reality for the occurrence in Hebrews 1:3. He also concludes that the use of hypostasis in Hebrews always denotes the reality of God, which stands contrasted with the corruptible, shadowy, and merely prototypical character of the world, but which is paradoxically present in Jesus and is the possession of the community of faith. We now look at the specific occurrences in the Greek New Testament of the word hypostasis, starting with 2 Corinthians 9:4. Hypostasis in 2 Corinthians 9 verses 3 and 4. Epempsa thetus adelphus ina mi ta kafkema imon ta hyper imon kanothi enda meri tuta ina kathos elegan paraskevsamini ite mipos eon elthosin sin emi makedanes ke evrosin imas aparaskevastus kateskin thomen imis inami lego imis endi ipostasi tafti. I have included verse 3 for additional background. The parsing of hypostasis in this verse is feminine, singular, dative of the noun hypostasis. Translation from the NRSV, but I am sending the brothers, in order that our boasting about you may not prove to have been empty in this case, so that you may be ready, as I said you would be. Otherwise, if some Macedonians come with me and find that you are not ready, we would be humiliated, to say nothing of you, in this undertaking. There is considerable controversy about how to translate hypostasis in this verse. Some scholars say that the focus here is concerning Paul's boasting to the Macedonians of his confidence that the Corinthian church will come through with their pledge of support for the saints in Jerusalem. But other scholars say that the context chiefly concerns Paul's project or undertaking to collect money for these saints. The NRSV translation of hypostasis by the word undertaking is consistent with BDAG definition 2. It is interesting to note that the RSV, predecessor of the NRSV, translates hypostasis by the word confidence. Helmut Koster rejects this translation and states that Paul is concerned about much more than whether his boasting had been right or wrong. He has expressed this concern already in verse 3. The following verse is not just a repetition of the same thought. Hypostasis in 2 Corinthians 11 verses 16 and 17. Pauline lego mitis me daxi arphana ine, Ide me ye kan os arphana dexaste me, ina kago mikron ti kafkisa me, alalo u kata kirian lalo al os en afrosini en tafti ti ipostasi tis kafkiseos. I have included verse 16 for additional background. The parsing of ipostasi in this verse is feminine, singular, dative of the noun hypostasis. Translation from the 1995 NASB. Again I say, let no one think me foolish. But if you do, receive me even as foolish, so that I also may boast a little. What I am saying, I am not saying as the Lord would, but as in foolishness, in this confidence of boasting. Translation of verse 17 by Ralph Martin in his commentary, see reference 3, page 356. What I am speaking, it is not on the Lord's authority, but, as it were, in my foolishness, and on the ground of my making a proud boast. Translation of verse 17b by Helmut Koster, see reference 2, page 585. In this purpose of boasting, which has been forced upon me. Again, there is considerable controversy about how to translate hypostasis in this verse. However, most English translations prefer the translation of the word hypostasis by the word confidence. The two additional translations given on the previous slide prefer the translation ground or purpose of boasting, which is consistent with BDAG definition 1 above. One must decide whether the context of this verse has more to do with Paul's confidence in his boasting or more to do with the purpose or ground of his boasting. A case can be made for either. Hypostasis in Hebrews 1 verse 3. Os on apaugasma tis doxis ke character tis hypostasios avtu, pheron te ta panda ta rimati tis dynameos avtu, katharismon ton amartion pi samenos ekathisen and dexia tis megalosinis and ipsilis. Translation 1995 NASB. And he is the radiance of his glory and the exact representation of his nature, and upholds all things by the word of his power. When he had made purification of sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty on high. Parsing of the word hypostasios in this verse is feminine, singular, genitive of the noun hypostasis. Westcott, see reference 4 above, objects to the translation person, as in the KJV, for example, for hypostasis here. He prefers essence in this verse. His argument has to do with how we understand the Holy Trinity. Most modern English translations use terms such as essence, very being, or nature, which are all consistent with BDAG definition 1. It is pretty clear that the context calls for a definition consistent with BDAG definition 1. Here, Scripture is speaking of the unity of Christ with God, in fact, the exact representation of God's nature. Helmut Koster thinks it inadvisable to translate hypostasis in this verse by the word essence, as suggested by Westcott, or as in the case of the Net Bible, for example. He bases this on the fact that in this verse, hypostasis is parallel to doxa, and both these words are describing God's essence. Koster states that Christ is the wholly valid revelation of this transcendent reality of God. Here then, hypostasis as invisible, transcendent reality is a term in the vocabulary of dualism. Note, Koster is speaking of the two well-developed theological terms, the glory and the transcendent reality of God. Hypostasis in Hebrews 3 verse 14. Metaki gar tu Christu yegonomen eonper tin arkin tis hypostasios mekri telus viveon kataskomen. Translation from the NRSV, for we have become partners of Christ, if only we hold our first confidence firm to the end. The parsing of hypostasios in this verse is feminine, singular, genitive of the noun hypostasis. F. Bruce justifies the use of confidence, assurance, or conviction by observing that these words are readily derivable from the primary sense of hypostasis, namely, that which underlies. He further states that this confidence rests upon a stable foundation. The author of Hebrews is discussing, starting in verse 6 of chapter 3, the fact that the recipients of this letter need to hold fast their confidence, parrhesion, and hope until the end. It appears that the use of hypostasis in verse 14 is used in the same way that the word parrhesion is used in verse 6. The translation of hypostasis in Hebrews 3:14 and Hebrews 11:1 is somewhat controversial. I would recommend reading Koster's analysis in reference to, especially regarding the uses in Hebrews, and several good commentaries such as those cited in references 4, 5, and 6 above. Koster's essential argument is that hypostasis always applies to an objective underlying reality rather than a subjective concept, such as may be indicated by words like confidence or assurance. He would translate hypostasis by the phrase, the reality of God, so that the latter part of the verse would read, if only we hold to our first reality of God firm to the end. This seems a little awkward in English to me, but keeps to Coster's idea that the word hypostasis always carries the meaning of reality of the transcendent God in the letter to the Hebrews. Hypostasis in Hebrews 11 verse 1. Estin the pistis elpizamenon hypostasis pragmaton elenkos ou vepamenon. Translation NRSV. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Hypostasis here, of course, is feminine singular nominative case. BDAG definitions 1 or 4 seem to fit the context. In other words, we could say that faith is the title deed of things hoped for, or that faith is the essence or reality of things hoped for. It is not clear to me how Coster would translate this verse, so I will simply quote from his analysis of this verse. Hypostasis is the reality of the goods hoped for, which have by nature a transcendent quality. Primarily then, elenkos and hypostasis do not describe faith, but define the character of the transcendent future things. Faith is the reality of what is hoped for in exactly the sense in which Jesus is called the character of the reality of the transcendent God in chapter 1 verse 3. Among scholars, there is a considerable diversity of opinion as to whether hypostasis is to be taken in an objective sense, such as title deed, or a subjective sense, such as assurance. For a fairly complete analysis of these ideas, see Paul Ellingworth's discussion of this verse in reference 6 above. However, I am not sure that the distinction in this case is all that determinative. For example, if I have assurance of something, presumably if right thinking is involved, it is because there is an objective reality behind it. In general, one has to do quite a bit of study to determine the best translation of many Greek words in the New Testament, hypostasis being a prime example. In any word study, context is crucial in determining the most suitable translation. Also, always keep in mind that a word may significantly change its meaning over time. That is, it does not always keep its original meaning and can even change in a way that is opposite to its original meaning. We close this word study with a quote from Psalms 38:8 of the Greek Septuagint, which contains an occurrence of the word hypostasis. Kenin tis hypomonimu uki a kyrios ke hypostasis mu parasu estin. Translation: And now what is my endurance? Is it not the Lord? Even my existence is from you. This translation is from the New English translation of the Greek Septuagint. Note, this is Psalms 38:7 in some versions of the Septuagint. Thank you for watching. As always, I defer to real Greek scholars in all matters of biblical Greek.